In a moment that stunned even his closest aides, King Charles III reportedly collapsed inside Clarence House after opening a handwritten letter from Prince William. What could possibly drive a monarch known for stoicism to the brink of physical breakdown? The answer, insiders say, lies in what William finally revealed Camilla's most devastating betrayal yet. And it wasn't just betrayal of the crown, it was personal. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The scene that followed was one few inside the palace will ever forget. King Charles had been alone in his private study, a place usually reserved for reflection and quiet routine, when the envelope arrived. No crest, no seal, no official markings, just his son's unmistakable handwriting. Staff say Charles dismissed everyone before opening it, insisting he needed privacy. Minutes later, a sharp thud echoed through the corridor. When aides rushed in, they found the king collapsed beside his writing desk, the letter crumpled in his hand, his face pale, his composure completely gone. Emergency medical assistance was summoned immediately, but even in that moment of vulnerability, Charles reportedly refused hospitalization. Witnesses claim he waved doctors away, repeating only one fractured sentence again and again, words that suggested not confusion, but devastation. His eyes were red, his breathing uneven, and tears had already soaked into the paper before his strength gave out. This was not the collapse of a tired man. This was the breaking point of a king who had just realized something fundamental about the woman he trusted most. What made the letter even more unsettling was the way it had been delivered. No aides logged it. No digital record existed. It had bypassed every formal channel, arriving hand-to-hand, father to son, as if William knew the contents were too dangerous to leave a trace. According to palace insiders, William had warned quietly, weeks earlier, that when the truth came out, it would shake the monarchy to its core. At the time, few believed he meant it so literally. As Charles was helped onto a nearby chair, the letter slipped from his fingers, its pages revealing lines that staff were never meant to see. Fragments of names, references to private decisions, mentions of authority exercised without consent. And threaded through it all was a clear accusation Camilla had acted independently, deliberately, and in ways that directly threatened the future William was meant to inherit. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. And William had finally put it in writing. For years, Charles had defended Camilla against criticism, shielding her from whispers and public resentment, believing their shared survival justified unwavering loyalty. That belief shattered in those moments on the floor of Clarence House. The betrayal described in William's letter was not symbolic or emotional alone, it was structural, tied to succession, influence, and decisions Charles never approved, but would be forced to answer for. As the room fell silent and the palace went into lockdown mode, one truth became unavoidable. This collapse was not caused by exhaustion or age. It was the physical manifestation of a realization too heavy for even a crown to bear. But to understand the full impact of William's letter, we must first uncover what Camilla had been doing behind palace walls, actions that would fracture the royal family forever. For months, whispers followed Queen Camilla midnight drives, hushed conversations in private wings, and classified documents that never made it to Charles. But now, for the first time, we trace the exact path of her clandestine meetings. And what she discussed might have altered the monarchy's future without Charles ever knowing. It began quietly, with subtle changes in palace behavior. Staff noticed Camilla's growing presence in advisory circles, her voice carrying more weight than expected during key discussions. She wasn't just commenting, she was influencing, directing, sometimes overruling. And while Charles remained unaware or perhaps unwilling to confront it, Camilla was creating a new axis of power behind his back. Insiders whispered about late-night meetings, conducted not in grand halls, but in dimly lit side rooms far from security cameras. The guest list? A curious collection of non-royal aristocrats and political socialites' names that had long courted influence, but never gained a seat at the royal table. Until now. These weren't social gatherings, they were strategy sessions. Topics ranged from media control to property rights to succession influence. At least one document, reportedly drafted in Camilla's hand and never reviewed by the king, involved a proposal to redistribute certain royal estates under new administrative oversight, a legal maneuver that could effectively sideline Charles and shift power to a shadow circle. When asked about it, Camilla allegedly brushed it off as a misunderstanding of duties. But the signatures on the draft told a different story, hers, and those of individuals with no legal standing in the royal chain. Even more alarming were the rumors of discreet communications with foreign envoys. Though never formally confirmed, there were whispers of messages passed through mutual friends abroad, messages that referenced British constitutional matters in unsettling ways. Camilla, it seemed, was not simply building a new internal network, she was preparing for something bigger, something that bypassed the traditional pillars of royal power. And all the while, Charles remained oblivious, either shielded or deliberately kept in the dark. But not everyone looked away. Prince William, already wary of Camilla's sudden rise, began to notice inconsistencies in policy decisions and public statements issued in Charles's name. Statements Charles had no recollection of approving. William's private concern grew into silent investigation. He began speaking with staff, reviewing communications, piecing together a puzzle that led only one direction toward Camilla. When he approached his father with quiet warnings, Charles dismissed them as paranoia. "Camilla wouldn't betray me," he reportedly said. "She's endured too much to ever turn her back." But William didn't believe it, and neither did a few key aides who had already raised red flags, only to be removed from their posts or reassigned without explanation. The palace, it seemed, had been compromised not from the outside but from the inside, by the very person Charles believed would protect him. As Camilla played her quiet game of shadows, Prince William began collecting the very evidence that would one day become the letter that broke his father. He stayed silent. He watched. And when the time was right, he struck. Prince William, determined to protect both his mother's legacy and the future of the crown, launched a personal investigation that would lead him to a betrayal darker than he imagined, and far closer to home. From the outside, William appeared calm, dutiful, committed to royal responsibilities and publicly aligned with the monarchy's every move. But beneath the surface, his instincts were on fire. He had begun noticing how his father's tone shifted, how decisions made behind closed doors suddenly favored voices that hadn't earned their place. Camilla's influence, once carefully measured, now bled into matters of state. Proclamations bore her imprint, appointments favored her allies, and Charles, increasingly isolated in judgment, seemed unaware that his power was being slowly, strategically drained. William didn't act rashly. He waited, watched, and learned. But the more he observed, the more undeniable the pattern became. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and it was happening under the guise of loyalty and love. Instead of confronting Charles directly, William turned to a quieter form of warfare. He began to involve select members of the Royal Protection Unit not to guard, but to watch. Camilla's movements were tracked, conversations logged, visitors noted. What he uncovered would shatter any illusion of palace unity. Buried within secure communications, one of Camilla's former confidants, an ex-courtier who had mysteriously resigned, was discovered exchanging encrypted messages with private contacts outside the UK. With help from discreet cybersecurity consultants, William's team traced the chain to a codename used repeatedly, Operation Sovereign Reset. It sounded absurd, at first. But as decoded fragments surfaced, the intent became dangerously clear. It was a blueprint, one designed to quietly reduce Charles's executive role while bolstering alternative power hubs under Camilla's direction. In essence, a shadow monarchy, working within the walls of the crown itself. The implications were catastrophic. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was a hostile maneuver, aimed at destabilizing the royal hierarchy from within. William couldn't believe the depth of the operation or the audacity it required. Camilla wasn't merely asserting influence, she was building a throne within the throne. And Charles, blinded by years of loyalty and emotional debt, had no idea. William told no one except Princess Anne. Of all the royals, she was the one he knew could weigh the truth without panic or politics. Their conversation was short, sharp, and weighted with consequence. Anne urged him to proceed with caution, warning that any misstep could fracture the family beyond repair. But even she admitted that what he had discovered could not be buried. Still, William hesitated. He knew that if he acted too soon without undeniable proof, Charles would turn against him. And Camilla, well, she would twist it into an attack on the woman Charles had spent decades defending. So William waited one more night. But everything changed the next morning, when his team brought him evidence of Camilla's collaboration with a figure he never expected. But William's restraint would vanish the moment he learned what Camilla had done behind Charles's back with someone Charles once trusted as family. Of all the people to ally with, Camilla chose the one royal Charles had exiled from inner circles, Prince Andrew. Their secret pact wasn't just shocking, it was strategic. And the deeper William dug, the more horrifying the implications became for the future of the crown and his father's dignity. When William's investigation led him to trace unusual communications routed through Camilla's private correspondence network, he expected lobbyists or external influencers. What he didn't expect was Prince Andrew. The same Andrew who had been quietly sidelined after years of scandal. The same Andrew whose royal roles had been stripped and whose public appearances were tightly controlled. Yet, here he was featured in a series of discreet entries in Camilla's meeting logs. The visits were framed as efforts toward family healing, but the reality was far darker. Camilla wasn't extending an olive branch, she was recruiting a partner in palace subversion. A leaked internal memo never meant to leave the palace revealed a shocking detail. It documented a private conversation between Camilla and Andrew, where they allegedly discussed a plan to restructure royal property controls. The targets were unmistakable: Balmoral and Sandringham, two estates deeply tied to the Windsor legacy, and, crucially, to William's future stewardship of the crown. The intention was clear. By adjusting management titles and introducing new trustees under Camilla's patronage, William's rightful oversight could be reduced to ceremonial relevance. It wasn't just an administrative play, it was a surgical maneuver to cut him off from the roots of royal power. The conversations didn't stop there. Camilla reportedly encouraged Andrew to re-emerge in the public sphere, but only through channels she personally approved. These included minor royal engagements, charity patronages conveniently aligned with Camilla's inner circle, and soft media appearances designed to reframe Andrew's image. All of it carefully orchestrated to paint him not as disgraced, but as misunderstood, a Windsor ready to serve again. William, already enraged by the quiet dismantling of Charles's authority, was now staring down an alliance that risked poisoning the next generation of monarchy. Camilla and Andrew, once on opposite ends of royal favor, had found common cause in one shared ambition: to control Charles by destabilizing William. Their goal wasn't simply influence, it was leverage. By surrounding the king with manipulated loyalties, they could block William from exerting the rightful leadership he had prepared for his entire life. This was no longer about opinion or personality clashes. It was a direct and deliberate breach of trust, of tradition, of justice, and of the private commitment William had made to his father and country. To weaponize a royal disgrace for personal gain was not only unforgivable, it was unspeakable. And in that moment, William knew there could be no more waiting, no more silent observation. With the truth in hand, William made the boldest move of his life. He sat down and wrote a letter designed not just to inform, but to shatter. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was a son's desperate cry, a prince's declaration of war, and a future king's act of protection. When King Charles opened William's letter, he didn't just read Camilla's betrayal, he felt every word as a dagger through the history they had rewritten together. The letter unfolded slowly in his hands. 4 handwritten pages weighted with intent, each line crafted not for drama, but for truth. It began with a warning that cut through Charles's defenses instantly. For your eyes only, before it's too late. There was no anger in the opening, only urgency, the kind that comes when time itself feels like an enemy. William didn't soften his language. He couldn't afford to. What followed was a methodical unraveling of everything Charles believed was stable, loyal, and safe. Page by page, William laid out the evidence. Dates of meetings Camilla never disclosed. Names of intermediaries Charles had never authorized. Financial transfers routed through private channels, small enough individually to escape scrutiny, devastating when seen together. The letter didn't accuse blindly, it documented. Each claim was anchored to proof, each revelation stacked atop the last until denial became impossible. This wasn't speculation, it was a ledger of betrayal. But the most devastating passages weren't the facts. They were the emotions William could no longer suppress. He wrote of disappointment that bordered on grief, of watching his father unknowingly surrender authority piece by piece. He spoke of Diana not as a memory, but as a moral compass Charles had once promised to honor. He warned that the monarchy's image, already fragile, was being quietly eroded from within, not by scandal, but by manipulation wearing the mask of devotion. William begged his father not to confront Camilla immediately, not out of fear for her but for Charles himself. The letter cautioned that her network ran deeper than anyone realized, that sudden exposure could provoke retaliation, leaks, or worse. It was a chilling suggestion, one that implied Camilla's influence had crossed into dangerous territory. Charles paused there longest, rereading those lines until the ink blurred through unshed tears. Witnesses say his hands began to shake as the truth settled in. The room felt smaller, the silence heavier. Everything he had defended, every sacrifice, every public justification collapsed under the weight of his son's words. Charles reportedly whispered William's name, not in anger, but in heartbreak. And then the tears came. Not quiet tears, but the kind that arrive when a lifetime of certainty dissolves in an instant. Moments later, his strength failed him. The letter slipped from his grasp as he fell, overcome not by age or illness, but by the realization that the greatest threat to his reign had been the person he trusted most. By the time staff found him, he was unconscious on the floor, the truth scattered beside him in 4 handwritten pages that changed everything. But the collapse wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a palace lockdown, a silencing operation, and an internal crisis unlike anything since Diana's death. Within hours of Charles's collapse, royal operatives launched an unspoken emergency protocol. Staff were silenced, footage was erased, and royal PR teams scrambled to spin the story as exhaustion. But behind closed doors, panic spread and the walls of the palace began to close in. The public never saw the chaos that unfolded in the wake of the king's collapse. Inside the palace, time froze. Phones were confiscated. Logs were scrubbed. Any trace of the letter's contents was locked down tighter than state secrets. Aides were summoned one by one and handed new NDAs more severe, more specific, more binding than any they had signed before. This wasn't just damage control. It was containment. The truth could not, under any circumstance, reach the public. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Camilla, now at the center of an internal storm, was escorted to a separate wing and barred from entering Charles's private quarters. For 72 hours, the queen consort was effectively suspended from her role, though not publicly. No statement was issued. No explanation was given. But within the palace, everyone knew. Something had detonated, and the fallout wasn't just reputational, it was familial. The woman once seen as Charles's lifeline was now his greatest liability. In that same window of time, William acted with quiet urgency. He summoned a confidential assembly of the Privy Council, bypassing usual channels, limiting the attendees to those he trusted implicitly. The topic was simple, but heavy with consequence: succession security, crown protection, and what internal safeguards needed to be enacted should Charles choose to abdicate or worse, be declared medically unfit. It was a meeting soaked in unspoken truths. No one dared utter Camilla's name, but her shadow hung over every word. Outside the palace gates, small cracks began to show. Rumors leaked to minor outlets: an incident, an emergency, whispers that Charles had suffered a health scare. But the moment those stories surfaced, they vanished. Royal media suppression teams were activated, swiftly issuing takedown notices, pulling strings and burying headlines before they could gain traction. For a brief moment, it seemed the entire British press had gone silent. And that silence was deafening. Inside, tensions climbed to breaking point. Princess Anne, already furious at having been kept out of initial conversations, reportedly threatened to walk out of royal duties altogether if Camilla wasn't brought in for formal questioning. "This isn't just about the king," she allegedly said. "This is about the monarchy." Her demand wasn't merely emotional, it was strategic. If they were to restore any semblance of stability, the inner circle needed clarity and accountability. Camilla, when finally approached, denied everything. She claimed innocence, called the allegations absurd, and insisted she had nothing to hide. But what raised alarm was not her denial, it was the absence of an explanation. She offered no defense, no alternate version of events, no plausible counter-narrative. Only silence, and that silence spoke volumes. Even those once loyal to her began to question what had truly been happening behind the curtains. With the monarchy at a crossroads, Charles had a decision to make, one that would either cleanse the crown or crumble it forever. When King Charles regained consciousness, he was not the same man. Those closest to him describe a silence that felt like thunder. He had seen the evidence, felt the betrayal, and now faced an impossible decision: protect his crown, or protect the woman he once called his salvation. There was no panic in his eyes, only a stillness that unnerved everyone around him. The doctors urged calm, insisting on sedation, pressing for rest. But Charles waved them off. His first request was not for his aides, not for Camilla, but for the letter, the very one that had brought him to his knees. He wanted it back in his hands. Alone. No staff, no interruptions. Just him, the paper, and the truth that had shattered the illusion he'd clung to for decades. He sat in his private chamber for hours. The palace, for once, held its breath. Inside that room, there was only one constant companion, an old photograph of Diana that Charles had kept hidden away in a drawer. Out of sight, but never truly out of mind. It was said he laid it beside the letter. And at one point, a member of staff passing outside the chamber swore they heard a voice whisper, low and broken. I should have listened back then. Whether it was confession, regret, or something more profound, no one could say. But it marked a turning point. The weight of years, of choices, of justifications made in the name of love, all collapsed into one moment of reckoning. Hours later, Charles emerged. Not to speak to Camilla, not to confront the inner circle, but to place a call to William. That single act signaled everything. He didn't reach for the woman whose loyalty he had defended with his crown. He reached for the son who had just pierced that loyalty with unflinching truth. The call was brief. No details have ever been leaked. But insiders say Charles's voice was steady, and his final words to William before ending the call were, "You did what you had to." There was no anger, only a painful, quiet acknowledgement of a truth too long denied. From that moment, the balance inside the palace shifted. Charles did not storm into accusations, nor did he demand apologies. He simply withdrew. His schedule was cleared, meetings canceled, royal obligations postponed without explanation. Behind palace doors, it was clear something monumental had been set into motion, and the man who once held the world's oldest crown now held something even heavier: doubt, and the burden of choice. But what Charles decided next would send shockwaves through the monarchy and force Camilla to face a consequence no queen had ever endured. The palace made no announcement, but suddenly Camilla was gone. Her name vanished from upcoming engagements, her press coverage halted, and her presence erased from official correspondence. King Charles had moved, and for Camilla, the fallout was only beginning. It began quietly, without spectacle. One by one, royal events that had once listed Queen Camilla as a key participant were updated, her name absent, her title omitted. No explanations were offered to the press. No formal statement was released. And yet, the silence said more than words ever could. Internally, Camilla was placed on what palace insiders cautiously referred to as a health-related leave. But no illness had been reported, and no concern was voiced by those who once surrounded her. Instead, private security was doubled around her residence, not to protect her from the outside world, but to contain what might come from within. William, without any official declaration, stepped into the vacuum. He began handling family affairs, meeting with royal advisors, making quiet decisions that would normally pass through the king. He didn't claim power, he simply filled a void that had been left gaping, and the palace allowed it, perhaps even welcomed it. The trust once reserved for Charles and Camilla as a unit now shifted consciously, or not, toward William alone. Camilla, meanwhile, began to feel the isolation she had once orchestrated for others. Longtime allies, some of whom she had helped elevate, started to distance themselves. Calls went unanswered. Invitations were quietly rescinded. In the court of royal survival, Proximity to scandal was a death sentence, and Camilla's name had become radioactive. She had gambled with the monarchy's structure, and now found herself with no defenders left willing to speak on her behalf. Perhaps the most symbolic blow came from Charles himself. In a rare but unmistakable move, he revoked Camilla's access to a royal estate she had come to view as her personal sanctuary. The decision, though unspoken publicly, was leaked by palace staff who described it as the final severing. That estate, once the site of intimate family holidays and personal retreats, was now off-limits. A message not just of withdrawal, but of exile. As the royal household adjusted to this new reality, whispers of abdication began to swirl not from the tabloids, but from within Charles's own circle. For the first time, serious voices questioned whether the king could or should continue in his role. The toll of betrayal, the collapse, the scandal, and the silence had aged him beyond his years in mere days. Some suggested he had lost the will to lead. Others claimed he was preparing to do what no monarch had dared voluntarily in nearly a century: step aside. But as Camilla's reign entered freefall, one final twist emerged: an envelope marked for William, discovered in Charles's private drawer. Just as the dust seemed to settle, a new storm was brewing. Inside Charles's drawer was a second letter, this one written by Charles to William. What it contained remains sealed, but insiders suggest it could alter the succession, expose deeper betrayals, or signal the king's quiet exit. It was found not by accident, but by instruction. Charles, in the early hours of a sleepless night, had summoned his most trusted legal aid and told him exactly where to look. The drawer was locked. The key never left Charles's possession. Inside was a cream-colored envelope, unmarked save for one line written in Charles's unmistakable hand: "My beloved son and future sovereign." Dated precisely 2 days after William's fateful letter, it had remained untouched, unread by anyone but the king himself. And now, it sat at the center of another royal storm, one no one was ready for. Speculation inside the palace erupted instantly. The timing alone suggested emotional upheaval, but the language hinted at something far more consequential. Had Charles, in a moment of clarity, begun preparing his own exit? Was this his final act as monarch, not on the throne, but through ink and legacy? Those who had seen the outside of the envelope described Charles's handwriting as shakier than usual yet bold, as if every word inside had been written with deliberate weight. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed the letter contained a direct confession that Charles now questioned whether he had ever truly earned the throne after everything that had unfolded. Others whispered that it outlined succession instructions changes that bypassed protocol, reshaped tradition, or even accelerated William's path to the crown. What's known for certain is that the letter has not yet reached William. It remains in the custody of palace legal advisors, locked in a private archive, pending Charles's final instruction. The king has neither authorized its release nor destroyed it. It simply waits, held in a limbo that reflects the state of the monarchy itself, suspended between legacy and reckoning. Its very existence has reignited questions the family had hoped were buried. If Charles no longer sees himself as the rightful protector of the crown, what happens next? Meanwhile, the rift between Charles and Camilla continues to grow. They've spoken only through intermediaries since the collapse, their last direct exchange ending in silence. Camilla remains isolated, her role undefined. The queen consort in name only, stripped of power, surrounded by suspicion. Charles has made no move to reconcile, nor has he made any gesture of vengeance. He simply waits, watching the damage unfold, carrying 1,000 thoughts he cannot share with anyone, except, perhaps, the son he now sees as both successor and witness. For William, the letter casts a long shadow. He is not asked to read it. He doesn't need to. Whatever it contains, he already knows its weight. It is a father's final reckoning, a mirror to the letter William himself had written, now returned with a burden of its own. And in that unspoken exchange, a legacy teeters on the edge of irreversible change. As the palace braces for what comes next, one truth remains undeniable: nothing in the House of Windsor will ever be the same again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.